Well, we come to another sort of hero of this course, Sergei Mosetyun, who we saw earlier, defeated Mickey Adams. And in this one, in the Slovakian Championships 2002, we see him again use our repertoire to win a nice game against Robert Tybinski, a strong international master. And I think this is, again, it's quite a simple model game. We don't want to overcomplicate these model games. And it just shows you a good way to play and a good plan against the French defence. And especially if your opponent starts playing some irregular ideas. And probably going to be quite a short video, this, because I only really want to just demonstrate an idea which you should remember. We're not doing the theory here. The theory, we've got enough of that elsewhere. And after our French defence advance structure with e5, Tybinski plays b6. No, by no means a completely ridiculous move. I mean, this bishop on f1 is our key piece, and we can see it in our main line variation sitting on d3, attacking black's king side, and it becomes extremely strong there. Black's worst piece is the bishop on c8, so black tries to exchange it off. b6, bishop a6, not a ridiculous idea at all. And this is not something you often see, though, in the advance, to be honest. And I do feel that if black wants to fight for equality or really fight, he must play c5 and aim for d4. Or the way I sometimes play f6 at some point. But f6 against our system with a bishop on d3 doesn't really work. I mean, again, we'll talk about this later. But I've suggested bishop d7 when the main move's bishop e2. But against bishop d3, the f6 idea is not working so well because of the light square weaknesses, which is another advantage of us playing our course. But after b6, a very sensible move straight away. Obviously, we know that black's aiming for bishop a6, c3. And the idea of this is to, well, if bishop a6 immediately, we can win a piece by taking that one and playing queen a4 check. And c3 is a useful move because we ensure our pawn structure. Our main pawn we're looking after, and we're not being precious about this. We're not being precious about our pawn structure, but we are being precious about the top of our pawn structure, the e5 pawn. And throughout ideas against the French defense, this pawn is the pawn we want to look after. We often give that one up on d4, right? We often just allow black to capture, and we try to get our knight to that square. So we're not really worried about anything, but we do want to keep this pawn here. Now queen d7, and these moves may look peculiar, but the idea is, of course, just to play bishop a6. And these, again, are irregular ideas that your opponent could play in the position. And what is a good way to meet any of these irregular ideas where black is not fighting in the center immediately? h4. A strong, original, and good move. This is just a very nice move to play in the advanced French, especially if your center is not under pressure. And this is a key maneuver, just worth remembering if you get time to play it. Often when there's more critical things on d4 going on, you won't be able to play it. But why is h4 a useful move? And this is also, if you look at a lot of the current strong computer programs of the world, they're playing this idea. There's two things. You get your pawn to h6, and, well, maybe more than two. But if you get your pawn to h6, you create holes around the black king. Let's just say you do that. I mean, I'm playing bad black moves, but you create holes. So if they go g6, they've created these dark square holes, and you can later try to get a knight to f6. The standard way is f3, h2, g4, f6, and you can get your bishop in on the dark squares. So that's one idea of pushing the h-pawn. The other idea, and this is something that, oh goodness me, sometimes I have blanks with the names. great French defense player, but also played very good on the white side. Doesn't play so much now. Russian, being number 2 in the world. How can I forget his name? Morozevich. And something that Morozevich used to do in these lines, he would put the pawn on h5 and he'd bring his rook out this way. And this is the other plan. And the rook can be very useful, attacking f7, attacking g7. It just increases the pressure. So now bishop a6 played, consistent, and black has now achieved his goal. I think it's worth taking here because the black knight is offside. This is a worse square for the knight. This is a worse square for the knight compared to c6. In c6, it has much more points, so you might as well just push that one offside. And now the consistent move, h5. So black has done what he wants to do. Okay, we've allowed the exchange of our best piece, but we are just continuing by using our h-pawn, which we're going to see generates new ideas, and our center is still intact. So I like our position. So yeah, this h5, I mean, it is a closed position. These positions are more closed than a lot of our courses. And what I mean by that is the pawn structure is locked. And that means you're going to have a bit more maneuvering long-term, not such crash, bang, wallop ideas in the French, but it's more maneuvering into your aggressive attacking positions. And this cramps black, it gives us some space. And let's just see how white built on this now. So c5, black has to really play this, but without a knight on c6 and a queen on b6, d4 is not really under attack. So now knight e2. And I like this idea because it gives the f-pawn room to maneuver. And the other idea we've got is just castles f4, f5, when black normally tries to play g6 and h5 to stop this idea. But now we've got our pawn here, f4, f5 is a good long-term plan. And now f6, which was criticized by Movsesian, but you can hardly blame black for playing such a move. Had he played some more maneuvering ideas, let's just see. Well, let's get our pieces out. Knight c6. And here, well, okay, you could wait for this move, but also just not bothering with f4 quite yet is okay. And after castles, I like the idea now of a4, just trying to open up that area of the board, playing on both wings. We can play on both wings when we're controlling the center, and we are controlling the center because of our pawns and our knights. And something like this, trying to start a little nibble over there as well. If knight takes, we can take on c5, and this is looking very fun. Now, against f6, again, I kind of like the way white plays this for now, because we've mentioned throughout that this is the pawn we want to keep. Very Nimzovich idea. We're not so worried about our other pawns as long as we keep our pawn here. And white just plays bishop f4, keeping hold of that pawn. Now, maybe black should have taken, but now I think even moving our bishop to that square with the idea of h6 causes some problems. So they have standard maneuvering, and now we want to get our last piece in the game. And the idea of white's knight f3 is Nimzovichian. Is that a word? Over-controlling the most advanced pawn in our position. And Nimzovich would basically say, if you keep control of that pawn there, you control the board. And here, white is certainly better. You can play on both sides of the board. I think even bringing the rook around here is very justified. We don't even have to castle. We can put our king on g1. We can also play a3, b4. We can play a4, a5 in some structures. It's a bit of an advantage for white. So rook c8, and, well, okay, you can move your king, but castles is fine as well. There's nothing wrong with this one. And now knight b8, that knight trying to get back in the game. Let's just see what white does. Very simple play. Get your pieces to the best squares. The rook is nearly always good on e1 in the advance, as we can see. And black tries to develop now. And here, Movsesian sees an idea to open things up. He could even use his h-pawn. He didn't play h6, but even something like this, and now opening up with pawn takes c5 makes a lot of sense. And of course, you don't always keep your pawn on e5 if you have tactical possibilities. And the idea of this is quite tactical now, that white can now open things up and play knight to f4. And again, you can see just the use of this one, and white's actually winning here. Both of these pawns are on pre. But instead, he took on f6 straight away, and now the same idea happens if bishop takes. There's this issue on the e file, so he goes g takes, and now the similar idea, taking on b8, and this is really a tempo gainer to play knight to f4. And tactically, black's been messing around a lot. The rook on e1 was a very important idea. I also like the way that white's used his knights here. You've got to think where your knights are nicely placed, and I like the way that white moved. Let's have a look at that move idea. In this position, I think a lot of people go knight f3, which is probably fine, but then you've got to ask yourself, where would the other knight go? And you can play this, but even a knight on g3 doesn't work so well. So I really like the idea that before developing one knight, Movsesian is thinking, where do I want to put both my knights? And with a knight on e2, Movsesian also realizes that he wants one knight on f4 and one knight on f3, because they'd be very nicely placed. So another thing to think about there, when developing one knight, think where your other knight can go to. And it's a similar idea here. We just take on b8, and this allows us to get the f4 square for our knight. So when black takes back, the knight comes into f4. And I think already you can see this great deal of pressure that white has. We got the target on e6. The black king is very weak. We can increase the pressure with queen e2. One more notable thing I would like to mention. After black goes in defensive and we get as much pressure against that weak point as we can, king f7, this next move is very theematic. The last theematic move I would like you to remember, and that I think this game demonstrates, and that is the move c4. This is often our little lever to open up the position, to get through to black's king, to prise open the situation, this move. And very, very nicely done here. I mean, we're not even worried about losing a pawn, because our idea is to just get a rook to the d file. Of course, we're not worried about losing a pawn. It's a gambit course. But I think it's well worth remembering c4. And we can probably even stop around here, because, of course, the important stage is over. So what to bear in mind from this game? Well, firstly, the h-pawn push is something, if black doesn't contest for d4, it's nearly always worth pushing your h-pawn. It gains space, it gives you a nice hold over there, and it stops black from getting his pieces to this square. So h4, h5 is a nice idea, but only if black is playing sort of some slow moves like b6 and queen d7. If he's fighting for the d-pawn, you can still push your h-pawn, but you should control your center first. Another thing you're often going to have to think about in these positions is, again, these are the slow lines, and even in the quicker lines, where do you put your knights? You know, you've got to, this whole opening thing is about developing your pieces. And in the main lines, you want to put this knight on f3, and the other knight often comes around to d4. And you can see that in the main lines, but these are slightly different. And if you put your knight on f3 here, it's not clear where this knight's going. Now, you can bring it somewhere like g3, but it's not really doing much on that square. So I like what Movsesian does here, knight e2, and bringing one knight to f4 and the other knight to f3. You know, literally getting one knight there and the other knight there. These two knights seem to work very well. The knight on f4 pressuring, the other one can come in and pressure as well. So do think, if your opponent plays irregularly, where your knight should be developed. I mean, generally knight f3 is normal, but in this case, this one seemed very nice. Also freeing up the f-pawn if you want to play like that. So again, if your opponent plays peculiarly, use your h-pawn, think where your knights will be best positioned, and just keep control. You're going to be better in most of the variations. So we now look at sort of our main way of playing against the French defence. And we're stepping into the shoes of one of the most creative players, I guess, you know, of the last 30, 40 years. Not so well known as the Richard Reports or the Jabavas of the world, but he's he's a very, if you want to imaginative ideas and you want to play aggressively and you're looking for, fun opening concepts, then you can't go wrong with Johnny Hector. Johnny Hector is a grandmaster from Sweden, and he plays in that kind of Viking unique way. And the system that we're suggesting you play against the French is really Hector's. I don't know if invention is correct, but it's really his idea. He's the one who developed it. Now we're looking at a game he played in 2008 versus Christoph Riener. 24-31, Christoph Riener. So a good player. And I think this gives a good idea about some, again, concepts that you should be trying to do. And remember, that's kind of the main thing we're trying to get across in these model games. Not theory heavy. The theory section is theory heavy. Funny that. So let's go in with our French. So we start off with the advance, as this is our setup. And you've probably already seen the Magnus Carlsen Harry Krishna game. So we're playing very similar to that. With knight f3, and then against this move and queen to b6, we are playing bishop d3. The most aggressive square for our bishop, and this fits in well with our course of playing the most aggressive options. And yeah, that's what we're doing here, right? We're simply developing. Our bishop is better, more active on this square. The downside is we don't defend d4, but we're not worried about d4. And now, after black captures on d4, very important that you don't automatically lift and play that move, because that's wrong. So no automatic opening moves here. Instead, castle's kingside. And we're offering a pawn for a lead in development, and we hope to build up an attack with our extra space advantage. And our extra space advantage is on the board because of our bridgehead, our main point, the e5 pawn. This pawn is key. Now, other options will be looked at later on, but a lot of people will just continue capturing here by capturing on c3. And I think we're generally happy to see this because a lot of the time we're going to try to bring our knight that way around, which obviously takes a number of moves, 3 moves. And in this case, it can zoom into the game immediately by just taking on c3. And we got like a Milner-Barry gambit. The Milner-Barry gambit is where we take back on d4. We don't do this. And after this one, castles, knight takes d4. And now this is the Milner-Barry where we now play knight c3. But I feel like our version is better than this. The Milner-Barry, this is the mainline Milner-Barry, suggested by Milner-Barry, funnily enough. And this is quite dangerous, but if black knows what he's doing, I don't believe it. Like a6. And you've also swapped off more pieces and you've allowed the black queen to get active. And again, this is from me having a lot of experience playing these positions from the black side, being a French defense player. But what we're doing is, especially when black takes it, well, you can kind of see we got a zooped up Milner-Barry, because if black wants to play that way, he's going to have to spend 2 more tempo to do that. And I think keeping the knights on the board, you saw on that last line, these pieces get exchanged, must help us. Why? When you have a space advantage, you want to avoid exchanges, because the space advantage is a nice asset to have, and your opponent has less space to maneuver with his cramped pieces. And also, this knight has some possibilities of coming this way. So I think in general, avoiding it, and we're not going into any really established theory here. So black now played knight e7. And this is, again, the main issue that black has, and this is something you've always got to bear in mind, is the pieces there highlighted. Getting those to good, stable squares is very hard to do. So you've got to move the bishop, move the knight, and try to castle, unless you leave your king there. And the problem with that maneuver is it's very hard to find good squares for your knight and bishop. And even when you do castle, you're walking into our strong bishop there. So in actual fact, this gambit is not just crash, bang, wallop, check, check, checkmate, trying to open our way through. We're actually saying to black, okay, well, we've got castle, we've got development. your king is not going to find safety. It might be stuck in the middle, and we're going to play against the coordination of your pieces. Because if you can't coordinate your king side, well, our king side is already castled. That must be enough compensation for us. And a lot of the time, we don't need to rush. We don't need to panic. And we can play on both sides of the board with our H pawn, and even on the queen side with our B pawn. And by using our B pawn, we can try to force black even further backwards on that area of the board. So it's quite positional, actually, this approach. And to really understand this, get into the mind of thinking what your opponent's trying to do and stop his plans. And after knight to e7, in this position, if we already think in that manner, you should be able to find the next move. Now, if we have a rook on e1 here, h4 is a very nice move to play because we're, again, trying to stop black developing. But with the move knight g6, we can't play h5, which we'd like to play when the knight, we want to force back there, because we don't have the rook on e1. And rook on e1 is one of our main ideas if black plays differently to this. I think black can just take here. I don't think we have adequate compensation. So we want to stop that knight from moving, or at least develop and just cause black some problems. Bishop g5. And that knight can't move, and there's some major problems here. For example, if you go h6, which a lot of people could play, especially in blitz games, knight b5, and black can resign. Quite nice. You can't move the knight because of the queen, and this would be rather annoying for black. So bishop g5, a good move to play. So I think now a6 is what has to be done. You can't allow that knight to enjoy itself over there. And now this rook e1 move. And again, this is the key square for the rook. I keep bringing up Nimzowitsch. This is from my youth. I remember Nimzowitsch demonstrating a similar idea. So I quite like going back in chess history about the over-defended bridge point in your position. And over-defending this point is certainly the way to play. And our rook is very useful if things open up. And this is just it's just a useful move. We're not in a rush. Black now played h6. And our repertoire choice, which we're going to look at in the theory section, is going to be bishop e3 here. I feel that once a6 has been played, another general rule to remember, the bishop belongs on e3. And you get this sequence quite often when black takes on c3. We bring our knight out. Our knight is looking at b5. So black plays a6. And then a very good way to follow this up is putting the bishop here and the knight on a4. This is going to be really, really strong, with something coming into the newly weakened b6 square, whether it be a bishop or a knight. And that means we can control that area of the board as well. Now, that's going to be our recommended idea, and I think that's better than what Johnny Hector played. But, you know, it's more of getting a little bit of a grasp to the kind of concepts you're trying to play here. And bishop h4 is tempting, but I don't like it quite as much. I mean, it does allow g5, which wasn't played, and bishop g7. And here I do think that white certainly has compensation. But with knight f5 coming at some point, I think black's also okay, because black is getting ready to castle, albeit his king's still weak with h4 ideas. But I think that we're allowing him to play these two moves, h6, g5, when we could have gone bishop e3. And had he gone this now, well, this knight b6, demonstrating how strong these kind of ideas can be, is very annoying for black, because we're taking over that side of the board as well. So bishop h4, and now black played knight b4. And black's very tempted to play this leap in a number of positions, but I don't really see why. This bishop, the light squared bishop, is nearly always worth keeping. Nearly always worth keeping. Don't part with that bishop lightly. Don't part with that bishop lightly. The bishop on d3. So this bishop is always worth keeping. You don't, this is a strong piece. So bishop b1 is just the normal way to meet this. And we're going to go a3 anyway, which is a move we want to play, gaining space over there. And now black plays queen c7, and it's very easy when you've got a cramped position to start playing moves which are not great. And again, I feel like g5 was the way that black should play this, and something like rook c8. And here we would go a3, and in this position, I think it's time to play h4. And this is a very useful move to get play on both sides of the board, b4 coming, and the black king is still in a bit of trouble. But this is still preferable to queen c7 when we can play bishop g3 anyway. And now we're preparing to play h4, just stopping this once and for all. So they both play normal moves, rook c8, and now h4. And this is a very key idea when the knight's on e7. And we're defending our bridgehead, the e5 pawn. Because if this one moves, well, you know, we can think about taking it in some cases, but this is even stronger. We're just saying go back. And if this one moves to this square, well, often we have the capture. And in this case, we're actually going to take here with a knight, practically winning. And our rook, again, is very well positioned. So you can even play e6 as well. You know, there's too many good options here. So g6 now played, and black's desperately trying to work out a way to get castle, get this bishop in the game. And now Johnny Hector plays h5, not fearing complications. Johnny Hector loves a crazy game. In actual fact, maybe a calmer approach here, and this is where I say you don't need to rush these positions. You know, you do have the compensation, and maybe something like just a3 and then bishop d3 is not so stupid. And the point being, if you go bishop g7, well, let's think, what's black trying to do? He's got his bishop here, but I don't really know what he's going to do next. And maybe we can just play like bishop f4, rook c1, if he castles, queen d2, and we got a lot of play over there. This is what the computer's suggestion. Let's have a look. h5. Now black took this one, and the German IM is up for the challenge here. And here the knight comes back to h2, and this is another idea I think you should get into your mind as a good idea, especially when black's moved the g pawn, because f6 is shouting out. And after rook g8, our queen now comes in, and we can obviously see we have pressure. We're not in a rush to open up black's king side, but given a chance, we will. Now rook g5 looks logical, kicking that queen to a less active square. And now another decent move, black trying to get the queen active here. Now bishop to h4 looks good. Already, the opening stage is over. I think you've got the main principles here, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker now. I mean, f4 was also strong, but this one's so tempting. And whoops, excuse me. And after rook h5 here, knight g4 should now have been played. And again, this maneuver well worth remembering. When black's played like g6 or even g5, remember your knight wants to get to f6. How do you get it there? Well, the idea of bringing it to h2 to g4 to f6 is very nice. Now g4 was played. I'm not actually sure this is correct, because after takes, black now made a mistake, but black could have played knight d3, and this would have given black actually fairly decent compensation. I'll show you how the game ended. It went knight f5, which is a strange idea, because we can just take that one, and I don't understand that, because black opens up his king, and with queen h5 coming, e6 is crushing, so it's just a blunder. d4, and now e6 anyway. Bishop takes, the black king is getting slaughtered, and the last move, knight to e4, wins the game. Too many black pieces are on pre here. For example, there's one nice line. If you take there, I can take and go knight d6 check, and I win the whole house. So just some little ideas to, I think, get you into the swing of things there with this idea. And remember, we're not taking on d4. If your opponent takes on c3, we want to encourage them to move a6. And when a6 is played, rook e1 is always a good move. This rook is very good here. We want our bishop to drop back to e3, generally, combine with knight h4 and combine with h4. So playing on both sides of the board, and the time will come where we'll have a chance to open up the position later on.